Today we're going to take a close look at Tao Te Ching chapter 16. And well, in my estimation, this chapter deals with meditation and what meditation actually means. It deals with how we should approach that and where it should eventually lead us. Enjoy. To attain utmost emptiness, abide in steadfast stillness. The 10,000 things arise in unison. We observe again and again. This creation is endless, and everything returns to its root. Returning to the root is stillness. This means to return to one's fate. Returning to one's fate is eternal. And knowing the eternal means to understand. Not knowing the eternal leads to unfortunate errors. Knowing the eternal reconciles. Reconciliation leads to righteousness, and being righteous means to truly rule. Ruling truly leads to the heavens, and the heavens lead to the Tao. The Tao leads to eternity. Not having a self means there is nothing that can die. So, hello everybody. I'm finally back from my holidays, and today we're going to look at the chapter 16 of the famous Tao Te Ching, which deals with, well, I guess it deals with the art of meditation, actually. It is not mentioned directly in the text, but, well, it's about attaining emptiness, abide in stillness. So, well, to me it sounds like basically a description of where meditation should lead us and what we can attain if we abide in stillness, right? So let's go through it and see what it has for us. To attain utmost emptiness, abide in steadfast stillness. So that's what I just said. To attain utmost emptiness. In Chinese thinking overall, the state of mind which the sages want to attain finally is the state of having an empty heart, which is the heart is the palace where the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, resides inside of the human being. And the idea is that this throne should be empty, because when it's empty, we can welcome the heavenly will inside of us and become kind of become a living Buddha, become someone who's guided by the Heavenly Spirit directly. So, but that only works if the throne is empty, so that it can enter. So, and as you might know, in most meditation practices, the idea is that you stop thinking, because if you stop thinking, you become aware of the world as it is, when it is not distorted through thoughts which run through our heads, okay? And by that, by attaining stillness in our minds, we make place for the Heavenly Spirit and we attain emptiness. So this is what the first two lines basically state and mean. So we carry on. The 10,000 things arise in unison. We observe again and again. This creation is endless, and everything returns to its root. So, this is a description of the clearness we attain when we are successful in creating this emptiness inside of us. Because, like I said, when we have no thoughts distorting our minds, we can see clearly. And so we see, that is the idea, that the 10,000 things, which is a term for all things, for everything, we can see them rise, we can see them fall. Okay, and as it is said in the text, we see it again and again. We see everything come into being, and we can see everything cease being. Okay, this creation is endless. Everything returns to its root. So what is described here is the cycle of life. Okay, and the sage with the completely still mind is just there watching the creation happening. Okay. So you sit in stillness, you become empty, you see everything happening without interfering. Okay. So let's go on. Returning to the root is stillness. That is very interesting. Returning to the root is stillness, or means stillness. That's another way you can translate this. Returning to the root means stillness. Okay, in the lines before we have read that this creation is endless and everything returns to its root. Okay, so what does that mean? That means the root is there. From there, things come into being, things die, and return to the root. Okay, that's the cycle. So when we say returning to the root, we mean this point where nothing is visible. That's where death is. Okay, the root is the part of the tree we don't see. The root is in the winter, when on the surface everything seems to be dead. Inside of the root, the life is being preserved. Okay, and in spring it can rise again. So when we return to the root, we return to absolute stillness. Okay, that's what the symbolic meaning of the winter is. Everything is still. Nothing happens. Okay, so to become still means to return to the root, where absolutely nothing happens. Next line, returning. This means to return to one's fate. Okay, returning to the root is stillness. This means to return to one's fate. That's a very interesting phrase. When you have experience with meditation, you might have experienced this. You sit down, you close your eyes, you try to get into this space where everything is calm and still and your thoughts are not doing anything. What came up to me when I was doing that is that very often I was able to see my own life clearly, and while doing that, things came up which were very meaningful to me. Things I need to do, things I have to do maybe, things I did wrong where I want to apologize. And you might say, well, but those are thoughts, right? And yes and no. It's hard to explain the difference between the day-to-day thoughts that just run through and very specific images that come up during meditation practice. There is a difference, but it's hard to tell to people who haven't experienced this themselves, while if you have experienced that, you know exactly what I mean. So, return to one's fate. What does that mean? Fate, the Chinese term is Ming. And Ming means something like the human destiny, things you should do on this planet, things you have to do, but also your karmic burden you carry around. Okay, that is also part of the idea of the fate, of the Ming. So, return to one's fate means you become aware of your fate, meaning of your tasks, of the things you should do, but you also become aware of the things you have to make up for. You have to be better at, the things you have to repent, maybe, the things you're sorry for, you feel sorry for. And due to that's happening, you are able to afterwards take care of that. So you connect to your fate in a way by attaining stillness and open up this room inside of you to become aware of what you have to do. Okay, so, and furthermore, you can then, when you know what you have to do, you can do it. When you know what you have to apologize for, you can do that. You can clean up your karma and you can take care of the things you should take care of. And by that, you can get closer to your real fate as a human being, which means to your calling, so to speak. Okay, it's a little complicated to understand, but I hope it makes sense. Okay, next one. Returning to one's fate is eternal. Okay, why is that? This makes me think of a line from the great Liu Youshang. He is from the Shanren Dao lineage of Taoism in China, which is the path of the righteous man, so to speak. And returning to one's fate is eternal. He once said that when you have cleaned up your karma, when you have made right all the mistakes you made, then that lasts forever. No matter how many reincarnations will follow, that is done. Okay? Everything you made right stays right. So that is a central Taoist idea. When you have done it, it's done. And you're free of that, and it will never burden you again. Okay? So that is the idea. Returning to one's fate is eternal. Okay. So now, next line. Knowing the eternal means to understand. Okay, and now you see, like with every line, we get deeper into it. So, knowing the eternal means to understand. This term, understand, which is another Ming, it is the same character for brightness. Okay, so for kind of shining, bright shining. So another way of saying this is you become bright in your mind, you become enlightened, you understand how things are interrelated. When you return to your root, attained understanding for your fate, okay, cleaned up your fate, so that's eternal. And then you understand the eternal, and by that you become enlightened. Okay, And enlightened means you understand how things are interrelated. When you look at people, you understand why they behave like they do. Well, it is said that when you reach enlightenment, all the questions disappear and you become aware of how reality and people and fate and karma are interrelated. Okay? So, return to the root of stillness. You return to your fate. Returning to one's fate is eternal. Knowing the eternal means to understand. Next line. Not knowing the eternal leads to unfortunate errors. Doing a little break here, a patient is coming. So, 1 week later, now I found the time to continue this video about Tao Te Ching 16. So, we spoke about knowing the eternal means to understand, to become bright, to become enlightened, okay? To understand the connection between everything. And now the next line is not knowing the eternal leads to unfortunate errors. And well, I mean, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? So if we don't know the connections between the different aspects of life, between what happens and our emotions, between our karmic destiny, what we bring with us on this planet, and so of course, if we don't know about that, it's obvious that we make errors, which means in this sense that we go further away from the source, okay? Because in Taoist thinking, we want to connect to the Tao. We want to connect to the source. We want to become one with the source, one with the Tao, one with God. And so unfortunate errors are when we deviate further from that and lose that connection. Okay. And of course, it also means doing anything that does not help, but instead hurt. Okay. So, next line. Knowing the eternal reconciles. This is wonderful, right? Because reconciliation, coming together, being at peace with how things are, that really is what the state of being inside the Tao, the state of being enlightened should be. You are reconciled with the world and everything that happens because you know that everything that happens happened for a reason. Everybody has their karma. Everybody has to pay for his own sins, if you will. Everybody, like if you've good karma, then you get the reward for it. So everything is balanced out perfectly. So of course, that knowledge reconciles you. Because if that's the case, you don't have to fight any fight because everything is just as it should be. That's the idea. Okay. So knowing the eternal, being enlightened, reconciles. Okay. Reconciliation, next line, reconciliation leads to righteousness. Okay. If you are at peace with the world, it becomes pretty easy to be righteous, which means act with virtue. Because if you are reconciled, you don't blame, you don't search for errors in others, you are content within yourself, you do only what you like, you don't complain. It's very easy from that point to be a good human being, to be at service to others, to be of help to others, because you understood everything, and then you can become righteous, help others on their way. Become Shanren, a good human being. Okay, So reconciliation leads to righteousness. Being righteous means to truly rule. Truly rule. That is the verb which is used in Chinese is wang. And wang is also it's rule. It's the verb rule, but it's also the king. Okay, so being righteous means to truly rule. Being righteous means to be the true king. King of what? King of your life. King of your destiny. King of your fate. Okay. So you become the king of your own fate. You become a righteous person. And you can truly rule, which means guide your own path in a way that benefits yourself, but also benefits everyone else. Next line, ruling truly leads to the heavens. Obviously, the heavens, the heavenly realm, paradise. Okay, when you are in that state of mind where you truly rule, it leads to paradise, to the heavens. And the heavens lead to the Tao. That's the kind of a, that's the next step. The heaven leads to the Tao because the heaven are an expression of the Tao. Okay, the heavenly realm, paradise, is a manifestation of the ways of the Tao. In paradise, that's the idea. In paradise, everything is just as the Tao would want it to be. Nothing deviates. Everybody lives their own righteousness, lives their own kingship to their own good, to the good of the family, to the good of the village, to the good of the country. So of course, like that is the way of the Tao. So the heavens lead to the Tao. The Tao leads to eternity. Because like we said earlier, if something is reconciled, if something is solved, it's solved for eternity. If you paid for a karmic sin, that's the idea, then that sin is gone and will never hurt you again. Sin paid is no sin no more. Okay? So, so the Tao leads to eternity. Okay, and now comes the concluding phrase. Not having a self means there is nothing that can die. Okay? Well, of course, why not having a self? Well, the idea is when we go to the first lines of this Tao Te Ching chapter 16, to attain utmost emptiness, abide in steadfast stillness. So remember, what we want to do, what is the aim of this chapter, is attaining utmost emptiness. What does that mean? That means become still, become stillness itself. So everything else, which is our ego, our intentions, our prejudices, our victimhood, everything, our ideas, our memories, everything that makes us something which is not the true Tao heavenly self. All of that is stripped away. That is the idea of this chapter, right? You return to the root, you return to stillness, you return to understanding, you return to being the king of your own life, you return to being righteous, you return to become the Tao in human form. Okay, you become a citizen of the heavenly realm. You strive off everything that makes a normal human self. Okay, so if you do that, not having a self means there is nothing that can die. And there you have true immortality. That is not meant at all in the sense that your body can necessarily live forever, although in Taoist thinking that is quite possible, and they searched for millennia for the magic potion or the herbs and the minerals that can make the body become immortal. But anyway, what is meant here is the immortality of the soul itself. And when you reconnect yourself with the Tao and become one with that, you of course realize that you cannot die, because that's the nature of all things. The eternal Tao is exactly that, eternal. And it's so big that you cannot even describe it with words. That is Tao Te Ching 1. The Tao which you can name the Tao is not the eternal Tao. So that is what we're talking here. We're talking to return. We're talking about returning to that state, to that holy state of mind. And like I mentioned earlier, I think from everything we've discussed now that actually this chapter is about a state of meditation, and like meditation in the truest form, what it should be to attain utmost emptiness, to return to absolute stillness inside of you, and then everything unfolds by itself. That's the idea. So, again, as always, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you join me again in Tao Te Ching chapter 17. And I wish you just the best. See you again soon. Bye-bye.